This is Dateline News and Conversation. We're back tonight with the crew. Kostas Izikos from Greece, Blas Kavchik from Slovenia, Bruce Gagnon from Brunswick, Maine, USA. Tonight, we're going to discuss some really important issues that aren't being talked about enough. The first, Russia last week gave a very strong message to the ambassadors from the UK and France. I think we can also believe that message was to the United States. And Russia said, once again, Nyet means yet. You're close to crossing the red line. I also want to talk about tonight the significance of the visit of President Xi of China to France, Hungary, and Serbia. I think this is really significant, especially at this particular time. We'll talk about the resistance from Hamas, the PLO, from Iraq, from Syria, from Lebanon, from Yemen, striking deep into Israel. Can the resistance win? And we'll also talk about briefly the United States versus Israel. Doublespeak. On the one hand, we don't agree with what you're doing in Rafah. We're going to cut back on military aid. But on the other hand, unequivocally, we support Israel. So, gentlemen, welcome back to the show.
Nice to be here.
I want to begin tonight with Bruce from Maine. I know you've been following this closely, Bruce. Russia last weekend called the ambassadors from the UK and France to the foreign ministry, and basically they gave them what I consider an ominous warning that if the UK, David Cameron, their foreign minister, said that Ukraine can use our Storm Shadow missiles to strike deep into Russia, and President Macron from France has been saying, well, we could send troops into Ukraine. In fact, it's been reported that some of France's special forces are already there. Bruce, are they listening in Paris? Are they listening in London? Are they listening in the United States?
I would say no and yes. And that's a bit of a complicated construction, I know. But I think they're intimidated by Russia. I think they're afraid. But on the other hand, out of their desperation as the U.S. and European 500-year colonial settler empire is collapsing, they're afraid that they have to do something now to stop both Russia and China and BRICS plus, if you will. So they're trying to do the most underhanded things where they don't get too involved. But on the other hand, because Ukraine is losing so badly, even with all the help that the U.S. and NATO have given them, both in terms of troops on the ground sent in as mercenaries, but we know they're active duty. I saw one time an active duty guy in his uniform a couple of years ago inside one of the Ukrainian-controlled communities near Donetsk in the height of the war going on. And, he was talking very matter-of-factly that he was there, and I'm sure he was involved in many different aspects of the offensive operation. So in spite of all that the U.S. and NATO have done, they're losing and they're desperate. And they're running out of equipment to send too. But they're going to keep, I think they're going to keep finding ways to pour in stuff, because bottom line, they think that, they just killed wounded 20 people in Belgorod, just over the border north of Kharkiv there, into the Russian border, that they keep bombing and shelling. Just in the last 24 hours or so, they hit a apartment building and half of it caved in. So they're gonna. It's the only thing they got. They can't win on the battlefield, so they keep attacking civilian. Also in Donetsk, a cafe got hit in the last day or so. So they keep attacking civilian places. So I think they're going to keep doing that because they want to try to wear Russia out, which doesn't seem to work anyway. But they're desperate and they're not gaining any ground. I think but they don't have any other option right now, and they don't want to surrender. And so I think we're just going to see more of the same for until really the Ukrainian army just collapses, until the soldiers just stop, refuse to continue to fight because it's certain death. Until that happens, I think we're just going to see more of what we're seeing now.
Yeah, I'm surprised that they don't seem to getting the message. It was in 2008 when then ambassador to Russia, William Burns, who is now under Biden, the director of the CIA, he sent an emergency cable back after he was called to the foreign ministry. And basically he was told, Nyet means Nyet, do not cross our red lines. At that time, the red lines were Ukraine and Georgia being considered to enter NATO. And it was a very strong message. Blaž, do you think that this message that was sent last weekend to the ambassadors of Ukraine and Paris were Nyet means yet, don't go any further. And yet, as Bruce mentioned, we can see them continuing to go further. What are your thoughts?
Well, these events have been analyzed in detail by independent media and on your channel also, and we have started discussing it today. I would add maybe a little bit different dimension to contribute to the complete picture, because yes, it was quite dramatic, and Russian ministry played tougher game than usual, and the threat for Russia is real, and Russia will undoubtedly be able to protect their strategic interests. But this is not the whole truth. There are levels of strategic thinking and manipulation not projected on the wall of Plato's cave we find ourselves in. Evans and Giroux, for instance, have written about the seduction of violence in the age of spectacle in their work Disposable Futures. And we are watching this film. Is it possible that above the level of events we can see and follow in Ukraine, Israel, and elsewhere, that there is a higher level of coordination of events and processes? Such background coordination has been developing at least from Napoleonic Wars on, has initiated and conducted 2 world wars, has been documented as intensive collaboration of the United States and Soviet nuclear scientists during the Cold War. So the forces involved have only gotten stronger in the background. So this is the level I would like to draw our attention to additionally.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because we have talked about this several times before in different shows, that there are forces that are unseen that have been controlling the narrative and controlling world events. Blush, you mentioned since the Napoleonic Wars, World War I, World War II, they appear to be even stronger. But the danger now is ever so great because, as you mentioned, nuclear powers are involved. And it's not just the United States and Russia, it's China. It's even North Korea, not to mention India, Pakistan, France, and Israel. And so there's so much more at stake. But are these power brokers, are they willing to risk it all? Kostas, over to you in Greece.
Well, I agree with what has been said before, that we have to look at the multi-level situation in the world today, because the connection of the military conflicts, whether it's the genocidal war against the Palestinians in the Middle East and Palestine by the Israeli state, or whether it's the NATO aggression in Ukraine, or whether it's the encirclement, the military encirclement of China, with bases in the Philippines, with nuclear subs in Australia, with armaments being flooded in South Korea, in Japan, and perhaps with Taiwan being the stranglehold against China. All these events are connected. They're not isolated events, whether they're diplomatic, geopolitical, geographical, economic, militarily speaking also. So I do believe that the strategic goal of the West in Ukraine has failed regarding the Russian Federation. Regime change is not an option anymore for the West. This is out of the box. So they're looking into alternative plans in order to continue a military aggression, which actually does not offer a solution for the West. The only thing it can do is play with fire or walk on a tight rope, meaning that the last incidents and events, diplomatically speaking, about the tactical nuclear weapon situation which has arisen in Russia with exercises as an answer to the great NATO military exercise which took place recently close to Russia. Where is this going to end? We have, as it is reported, French Foreign Legion troops in Ukraine already with some French officers. How is the West going to continue in this war that offers to the West? I'm not talking about Russia, to the West, any of their solutions or strategic goals which they had planned before. So if they're going to face a defeat, not only militarily, but mostly economically and geopolitically and energetically speaking in the European theater, Europe is going through a severe economic crisis, very close to what happened in the 20s and the 30s. And one has to look at this picture and see that the diplomatic channels have been cut off by the West. And I will just finish by mentioning that in the last UN vote, where the United States position on Palestine was beaten in the General Assembly, and Palestine now is a member of the General Assembly with more rights than before. The answer of the Israeli ambassador to the UN was ripping the UN Charter in front of all the hundreds and more than 200 representatives of 200 nations in the UN. So, you know, the disregard of any diplomatic structure which is still standing after the Second World War and after the Cold War, the First World War, because this is a new Cold War with new dimensions and more dangerous perhaps, is a question that is going to be a riddle for many, many analysts. But the only answer that I can find, and I finish with this, it is if the European people do not act in a very solid, unitary way to stop the NATO war on the continent, the escalation is inevitable. It will continue. We don't know how much and how far, but it will continue.
Yeah, some very ominous warnings for all of us. We are not being represented by the people who are now in power in the United States and the quote collective West. It's a very dangerous time. I want to move on now to what I think was another very timely and significant event. President Xi made his first visit to Europe in 5 years. And he went to France and spent a couple of days with Macron and Ursula von der Leyen. And I'm not sure what happened there. But then he went to Hungary and Serbia, two countries that are balking, are fighting back against the European Union and NATO, especially with assistance to Ukraine. Blas, I'm going to come to you first. What is the significance of President Xi coming to those three countries today?
Of course, it's very important, and he was greeted as a champion of peace and cooperation, at least in Belgrade, and then in in Hungary. It was really big event in many aspects. Well, France was a bit specific because there was grandmother Ursula von der Leyen also present, controlling Macron not to make any mistakes. So, and about Macron, he says today one thing, another day another thing. He's a flip-flopper. And Ursula von der Leyen is now presiding over a completely new army. Thomas Fazzi just published interesting article mentioning new army present. There was 50 NGOs at European Parliament, and President Metsola met with them and thanked them for pushing United European Union values. And now they are going to sign contract with 500 NGOs. So this is a new army attacking our minds from all sides, alternative sides. Now, coming back to this question, because we are living in completely new circumstances of war. Of course, it was very possible, a very promising trip, and I had some friends in Serbia who said that it was really touching. The sincere contacts of President Xi with Serbian leadership, because they have both been bombed by NATO back in at the end of 90s, and because Chinese journalists have been killed purposely. Of course, NATO then apologized for that as if it was a mistake, but it's a deep tie now between Serbian people. They have developed positive feelings to China, and let's hope it will develop in a positive direction. Now, I always say, and I will repeat also here, I hope that China and Russia will say goodbye to Agenda 2030. If they will not depart themselves from the policies of globalist agenda, then we can expect to be brought into the feudalism 2.0 through multipolarity concept. So we have to be skeptical and critical. But still, for the time being, the national sovereignty of national states still demanded by Russia and China is a positive factor in this situation.
Oh, bless. You know, I agree with you. I just hope that Russia and China are resisting as much as they can this globalist agenda 2030, as you mentioned. At times, sometimes it doesn't look like it's as good as we would like, and it's good to be skeptical. And I agree that I think going to Serbia, and because both of them were bombed by NATO, the United States, I think that was an important visit, and showing, I hope, the solidarity and the support between the two countries. I can only hope that that grows. The same thing with Hungary and Orban. China is, in my opinion, striking at some vulnerability. Boy, vulnerability. My gosh, can't even
Vulnerable
say it.
states, yes.
Yeah, you go ahead. You correct my English.
No.
Very vulnerable situations.
Yes.
And I think that's very important. Kostas, your thoughts?
Well, back in the days of the Soviet Union, I remember that the Cold War rhetoric was the soft belly of the Soviet Union was the South, the Muslim Soviet republics and the Caucasus. Now, it seems the Chinese have discovered the soft belly of the European Union today, and they're taking good advantage of it.
Yeah.
If one looks at bilateral agreements that President Xi and the president of Serbia, Mr. Vucic, signed, you will see an incredible number of volume of trade, free trade as they call it, more than 10,000 Serbian products, food products, agroeconomic products, technological products will go into China. They will flow and they will be exported to China with no costs for paying over taxes and things like that. So they're giving the Serbian entity, the Serbian nation, a way out to keep them going as much as they can and being independent towards the neo-colonialist perspective of them becoming a member of the European Union, because we know that when a nation becomes a member of this club, this is a closed club. You have the club who live in the penthouse, which are the Germans and the French and a few others. And then you have the people in the middle. And then we in the Balkans here in Greece were in the basement, of course, as we know. We have been there since we joined the European Union in 1981. We don't see a lot of light outside in the real world, economically speaking, and oxygen speaking also. We don't breathe democratically here under the European Union. So the Chinese are giving these countries a way out and an economic development outside the European Union. This is very, very important for Serbia, for Hungary. Now, the message to France, and I keep this phrase that was put out by President Xi openly, in front of French politicians and the French and the world media, forget about your old masters. China is coming. Now, this is a very strong phrase. It's telling the French public that they have to look at no masters from the past or masters for the future, but they have to look for partners. Now, what Blas mentioned, if this partnership is a new partnership of a new neo-colonialism in the 21st century, we're not going anywhere. We're not going to the future. We're returning to the past, but we just seem to have technological advancement, but no philosophical or political advancement in any way. So I do hope really that the question of independence and sovereignty for the nations and the peoples of Europe and the peoples in Africa, of course, the French, you can analyze their psychology. Mr. Macron is a very predictable leader. When he talks about Ukraine and the way he talks about Russia, it reminds you of little boys when they get into a fight in school and accuse the other boy why they took their toy or their ice cream. Well, it's, they lost Sahel in West Africa as an old colonialist region. And Russia and China are entering these regions, gaining economic partners, not becoming neocolonialists again. So this to France is not understandable. That is why they're reacting in such a childish way, expressed by President Macron, who is really very predictable and a very big loser in the big game of power changing and power playing in today's geopolitical world. So yes, President Xi's visit has scored a lot of goals, as we say in football, and he's looking into the future, working economically, politically, diplomatically with nations in Europe, and telling the other nations in Europe, you can also join this club of becoming more sovereign towards Brussels and towards this close club by the Franco-German relationship that has existed in the European Union for so many decades.
You know, I can't thank you enough, Kostas and Blas, especially as Europeans, communicating what you are to, I think, what is mostly a Western American audience. It's very encouraging to me to hear both of you as Europeans speak about the importance of what Xi just did, and Xi in Russia, what they're both doing. Bruce, what are your thoughts over there on the other side of the Atlantic?
Well, I agree with you, Regis. I think they both did an excellent job. And my question, I'd like to hear Kostas a little more say something about how he so far sees Europeans reacting to this visit by Xi. I'll just add that I know China needs some things from France, particularly parts, including maybe engines for their commercial aircraft that they're building. They're trying to build their own domestic plane, but they do need some help with some things. So China is looking for some things, and so it plays well in France, I'm sure. At the same time, though, I think that Xi is saying to all of Europe, as your economy has suffered largely because of these sanctions you all joined in on Russia, following the United States and then blowing up Nord Stream, which increased the price for Germany and probably some other states as well in Europe, the cost of fuel that they're now buying from the U.S. and other sources. The U.S. LNG gas is 4 times the price of what they were paying for Russian cheap natural gas. So I think he's offering them an alternative there that it would seem to me would be really impossible to resist, especially as their economies are hurting the way Kostas said in his opening bit there. So anyway, I'll stop there. I'd love to hear Kostas follow up a little bit on this question of how people are reacting.
Go ahead, Kostas.
Well, just to start briefly, Xi Jinping's visit to Serbia and Hungary and France was underplayed a lot by the systemic media here in Greece, and I think all over Europe. They underplayed a lot of the important points that you mentioned and Blas mentioned before, and I mentioned. So I would say that the instinct of the people who are not believing what they hear, and there are more and more every day of this systemic media dictatorship that tells us the same story every day, is that China is a possible new partner for hurting economy in Europe. For example, we remember that about at least a month ago, and Blas can also speak about Slovenia and the Balkans and Central Europe, we had a lot of people in the streets from the agroeconomic field, agricultural field economy. People are hurting. They're not producing high prices, better products sometimes from North Africa or the Arab world or Latin America that are very compatible to the European products. So you see, China has come at a time where recession, poverty, mass poverty, and the extinction, almost the extinction of the middle class, as it was one of the biggest social creations of post-World War II in Europe is disappearing very, very quickly. So I think the people are understanding more and more that Europe within its borders is more like a modern Gaza, which has not been bombed yet, but it's being bombed from the media and from the economic elite in a way where you don't feel the bombs exploding over your heads, but only in your pockets at this time. So the perspectives are that as the BRICS Plus expand their influence, and I mentioned this by finishing, in a more just, social, democratic, and equal partnership with European nations, not only will they be more attractive, but the disappearance of the European Union dictatorship will be a faster way out for the people of Europe. So I think China is on this path. It's a new path for them in the international arena, and they will follow in Latin America. President Xi will be going to Cuba. He will be visiting Brazil very soon. So you see, China is opening up to the world today in all continents, telling the world there is another way out.
Wow. Great insights, Kostas. Blas, would you like to add to any of that? How the people, from your perspective in Europe and Slovenia, how are they reacting?
Well, this situation, I agree with Kostas explaining how we, the people of Europe, are being softly bombed, poisoned, robbed, and killed, but in a very specific way. And Slovenia is here even more interesting because life is relatively good for many, because a lot of this corruption money from Corona project has spread around. This is one thing. Another thing is that some businesses are successful in compensating problems with supply chain from China and so on. So we are actually in a kind of a pocket where things seem very, very nice for many people, as long as you are not on the list to if you want to see a doctor, a specialist, or if you are retired, or if you want to have young people are hardly getting now normal long-term employment. It's all precarious jobs and so on. But I had when was it, in 2011? 2011, I had a chance of a personal meeting with President Xi. I was visiting China as a president of National Council then, and he was. It was a few months before he was elected to the position of president. He was vice president, but even he accepting me as a president of a second chamber from a small country like Slovenia, it was a little bit unusual, high treatment. But I must say, I got very, very good impression. He was trying to explain to me the development question of China through the perspective of what have we done for our citizens so far, and where we still see the problem. So I must say, shocked in a way when I have compared his narrative and position of speaking with other world leaders, including Slovenians and so on. So far so good, and I hope that interaction of China will help build this strategic Eurasian bloc, which is the main strategic threat to present imperialism. And I liked very much what Kostas explained about the soft belly, and let's understand it in a positive way, that this charming of those European countries who are most likely partners will move also some European policies in a positive way. But as I said already, previous time, European Union must get this integrated as well as NATO. And we have to build European cooperation on new pillars of cooperation of a friendly, independent, sovereign national states. And I hope China and Russia will be helping us with this process.
Well, I have to thank you. Not too many people are talking about the things that we're sharing here tonight. Kostas and Blas and Bruce, your perspectives on these things is incredibly important and invaluable. All right, let's shift gears. Israel, this obscene violence on Gaza, but everybody is focusing on that. I want to focus tonight on the resistance that is striking back and being very successful. And when I talk about the resistance, I mean Hamas, the PLO, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, the Houthis, and Iran, who is the elephant in the room. Bruce, I'm going to come to you first. What are your thoughts on the resistance? Are they being successful? Can they win?
Well, I think Israel has lost this war. First off, I would say they've lost also not only the military part. I mean, what I mean by that is when they say their goal was to destroy Hamas, they're not going to be able to do that. And so for that reason, they're losing. They're spending a lot of money. Their economy is in bad shape because of this war. But beyond that, Israel's losing the PR war around the world big time. When earlier it was talked about how the Israeli ambassador to the UN was tearing up the charter, the UN charter, after this resounding General Assembly vote supporting Palestine. It indicates that Israel is in bad shape around the world, and it's getting worse by the day as they go into Rafah. But I think the axis is limited in terms of effectiveness. I think it's great. I love Yemen. I love how they're. It's a poor country that's been destabilized for years by wars by Saudi Arabia and other countries in the region, other Arab monarchies. But you got to really cheer for them. But I think what they can do is limited, and what Hezbollah, it's putting that, they've lost a lot of troops to Israel bombing and retaliation for Hezbollah efforts. So, but what they can do is fairly limited strategically, I think. Although it does tie up Israel a lot and forces them to spend a lot of money, and a lot of weapons. But the key thing, I think, is that that the U.S. is also losing big time around the world. The U.S. lies and double standards, and Blinken just absolutely caving to Israel all the time. Biden showing the world that he's a Zionist at heart. They must have some big secrets on him, kind of the Epstein kind of secrets. Biden, because he's just worthless. And but in this country, all you hear from young people anymore is how much they hate Biden and how much they're not going to vote for him in the next election. So, but one of the other good things I think that's happened is Turkey, after a long time not doing much, just talking big. Erdogan would say things, that Netanyahu was Hitler and stuff like that, but not really doing much. But Turkey just recently started an economic embargo of Russia, basically shutting down their trade
of Israel.
with Israel. Right? Sorry.
Yeah.
I think that was a really big step. And I wish other Arab countries would do the same thing. It would be huge if Saudi Arabia would say they're not going to send any more oil to Israel. That would be huge. The other decent thing that just happened was Egypt said it was going to join South Africa. They're filing their genocide complaint at the ICJ. So Egypt is now signed on to that. I'm sure Egypt is very angry and is under a lot of pressure from their own citizens to do something because of the incursion into Rafah now. So, I think the Arab Street, we need a lot more from them. They've been doing a lot, but we need a lot more from them to put more pressure on Jordan, on the United Arab Emirates, on Saudi Arabia, other countries in the region to step out more. That's a big need we have right now. And I'll say that I'm really proud of the young people across the country in the United States under severe police brutality now. They're not stopping. They're continuing. They're escalating their protests against the U.S. policy and Israeli policy, and I'm very proud of them for that.
I was going to ask you to expand on that, and I'd like you to just briefly a little bit more. I don't know how many colleges and universities across the United States now that have joined in these demonstrations in favor of Palestine and demanding that their universities and colleges disinvest in anything that has to do with Israel. Bruce, how resilient can these, and it's not just young people, you corrected me when we did a show last week, there's lots and lots of us old timers who are joining them and supporting them. Comment just a little bit more on do you think that this time, and when I say this time, I mean under Obama, he shut down the Occupy movement over one weekend violently. Do you think this time these young ones and not so young ones can persevere and hang on?
I think so. Although, colleges and universities are just having their commencement exercises and ceremonies, and they're closing down largely for the summertime. So it's going to be interesting to see what many of these students do over the summer. But hopefully they'll just be organizing protests in their cities, blocking traffic. Just today, I saw a video of one of the bridges into New York City into Manhattan was shut down as people of all ages were blocking traffic. Many got arrested. And then when the bus full of people that were being arrested, tried to come off the bridge, people were at the exit ramp and they were blocking the bus there, so people are really serious right now. And so us oldsters, the government is calling us outside agitators when we join any protests by the students, which I think is interesting. I watched a video this morning from a place where I lived for 30 years, Orlando, Florida, and they had a huge protest there in the heart of the city, and the police busted into it, pepper sprayed people, arrested some. But, and this is after the governor of Florida, who's a real right-wing nut. He's been threatening anybody that protests, with severe treatment. So this was a huge, hundreds and hundreds of people in conservative Orlando, Florida, which I loved it. So anyway, I think it's not going to stop. Like Obama was able to shut down the Occupy movement. I think this is much bigger, much broader, and has a lot more determined people. There wasn't a Gaza going on at the time of the shutdown of the Occupy movement, and people are really, I've heard so many students say that I don't care if they expel me from college. I don't care, if they dox me and everything else. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep staying on the street. I'm going to keep protesting because I have to. And that's really big.
Yeah, thanks for that, Bruce. Very encouraging. Blas, going to come to you. We're talking about, on the one hand, the resistance that Hezbollah, the PLO, Hamas, and these other countries are putting up in Israel. And we're also talking about the protests that have been going on, not only in the United States, but around the world. They are part of the resistance. Blas, your thoughts?
Yeah, first, this resistance in the West Asian area is to the large extent, it represents a defense and liberation effort of the people who have all their right to survive and thrive. Their self-esteem is growing, which is good. Now, Palestinians, Hamas, Yemenis, Iran, Hezbollah have successfully applied modern technologies of warfare and shown great courage and persistence. But this resistance is not as monolith as one would like. For instance, PLO is a totally corrupt organization which is not acting on behalf of Palestinians as it should. It's also clear that Muslim Brotherhood has their fingers and their influence through different sections. So it's not all that monolith in a positive way, but some very important processes are taking place. I am, for instance, impressed by the Syrian leader al-Assad, who was offered a cushy arrangement to leave Syria, but decided to fight together with his people for their national state. At the same time, Syrian state shows acceptance of equal rights of citizens, irrespective of their ethnic or religious affiliations. So I hope that this positive model will be helpful for cleaning the West Asia from these family dictatorships installed by first the British and then American global billionaire elite to help them control the flows of oil and other resources. Israel and the economic situation. Well, Israel was always an imperial project, and its economy artificially developed in military direction. Much like Ukraine, it cannot function organically, but will continue as long as global elite calls the shots. About the American protests, I'm really impressed and inspired and thankful for all those people. I heard the number that more than 2,500 have been imprisoned, and they are fighting really seriously. What I would hope is that they will develop, with the help of intellectual elites in United States and as much as possible in each individual federal state, to help develop a more comprehensive defense and liberation program. Not just to say we don't want that, we don't want genocide, which is correct, but also to explain what we do want. And comprehensive means also that other segments should join. Some teachers have already joined. They should join en masse. Then workers, farmers, it's time to join forces. Otherwise, we will just see a repetition of yellow vests or of Canadian truckers or Occupy. It's all controlled, and it has to grow in a more comprehensive movement, which will also have a clear picture of what we want in a direction of a constitutional democratic republic, probably. And we will never get there, and American students will never get there if the powers that be remain in power. It's a very serious question.
Wow. Thank you, Blush. Kostas, your thoughts?
Well, I would like to start by congratulating and thanking your generations, the older generations during the Vietnam War, Bruce, yourself, and others, with names or not names that I know, but you have given an example of ethical and historical victories over wars, imperialist wars. So there is no difference today with when a young student like Bruce very vividly explained, I don't care if I will be expelled from the university or from my college. It's the same thing that the youth said, I will not serve in Vietnam even if I have to go to jail or have to be captured. I'm not going to kill innocent people. Those generations, even though they're like 50 years apart, they're telling the same story. And it's an ethical story. It's a story for humanity. And that is why my congratulations and my admirations for these young people in the United States who have created and have fueled similar events in universities in France, in Greece, in Belgium, in England, with people in the streets for Palestine, in heroic Ireland, which is the champion of champions in Europe for the Palestinian cause. And I do agree what has been said, that Israel has already lost this war. They are not going to win this war. And Mr. Netanyahu knows this, and that is why he's so desperate in continuing this genocide, because he has no way out. He sees no way out of this equation. He will have to pay. And he will have to pay whether in a court, in an international court, or he will have to pay through his last days, as long as he lives, remembering that he was another genocidal figure in history, which will be along with others in the past. So Israel lost the mediatic war. Israel is losing the economic war. Israel is losing its famous military might when a $5 million rocket from the Iron Dome hits a $2,000 drone. When they both go down, who wins? Not Israel, not its economy, not its people, not its workers, not its society. So I think that this adventurism of genocide that started with this government of fanatics who are more attached to mythological tales in the past rather than reality today are going to pay a very heavy price for what their criminal acts. Europe has been a silent partner in this genocide. Germany, not so silent. Germany perhaps is the most voiceful ally of Israel in the European Union. As you know, even Greek politicians and professors from Scotland have been not allowed to enter Germany in the last month because they were going to attend pro-Palestinian congresses. Historically speaking, the Jews are not only the Semite people in the Middle East. Palestinians are Semites. The Arab people are Semites. When you say anti-Semitism, you mean a whole region of people, historically speaking, 5,000 years ago. So we have to learn a little bit about history itself when we try to defend, but not really defend, that Israel is acting in self-defense. It's not acting in self-defense. It is a country that in its constitution has no borders. That is why it's an expansionist power in the region. All its wishes and strategic thinking in reestablishing diplomatic and very strong economic and energetic relations with the Arab world have failed now after this. And Iran, as you mentioned, Reg, in the beginning, and the other forces, military forces and political forces in the region have a long-term plan. They're going to weaken Israel to the bone, economically, socially, diplomatically, internationally. They're not going to start a war. The only solution for Israel is a war, widening, generalizing this war, even using tactical nuclear weapons as some of its ministers have mentioned in the recent weeks. This is their way out in order for them to think they're going to find a solution of this lost war. That is why all the people around the world and humanity itself already knows who is the victim and who is the perpetrator of genocide. The court of the people around the world have given their prediction, and everybody knows this. So now it's a question of time and how long it's going to take, historically, political time, for Israel and its leaders, its political fanatical leaders, to pay a heavy price on what they have done against the Palestinian people for the last 75 years. Because everybody knows if this does happen in its worst tail and end to the Palestinians, who is going to be next? This is a test for humanity in the 21st century. That is why there should be no winners in this genocidal war on the Israeli side. Only humanity can win. And Palestine won a great victory and battle in the United Nations. This must not be undermined. And the childish reaction of the Israeli ambassador in the General Assembly by ripping up the UN Charter, as Bruce mentioned, what kind of an answer is that? What is the argument? What is the political argument? We don't believe in the UN Charter? Well, they should say that openly and then take off their mask and see, and humanity can just see, even in the most friendly and allied forces within the Western world that see Israel as a tool for expansion in the region, have lost also this war, not only the continent of Europe, but also in the Middle East, and in future wars that will explode, because multiplying peripheral wars in the world is not the end of BRICS Plus over any other antagonistic political, military, geopolitical forces and nations that are going to arise. This is not the way.
Wow. This has been quite a show. Seriously, I don't think there's an exchange of ideas like this in many other places. I'm deeply indebted to all three of you, Blas, Kostas, and Bruce. Thank you so much. We'll look forward to the next time.
Thank you. Bye.